Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Intentional Man Podcast. I'm your host, Rick Luttrell. Today, we're going to be talking about a topic that I hope is fun and not divisive. We're going to be talking about different styles of church that we go to nowadays. You know, you and I grew up differently, different styles of churches, different denominations. So we've even experienced in conversation some of the differences that we prefer on a Sunday morning, for instance. But, there's a lot of differences in churches across the United States now, and of course, across the world. Yeah, I was thinking it's interesting that when the church was started, you didn't start off, when the church was established back in Christ's day and by the disciples after Christ's death, it's not like they established these different bodies based on, are you a Baptist, are you a Methodist, are you a Presbyterian, and all of that, right? They were based on the cities that these local bodies were in.
Right. Yeah. It was based on your location. So you would have the church at Corinth or the Galatians, or, a lot of the New Testament, Paul's letters are to those different churches, of course. But you're right. It's not like they started off. And of course, it wasn't until much, much later that you would start getting Lutherans and Presbyterians and Calvinists and so many of these different denominations that kind of separate us when they really shouldn't. And yeah, this discussion at the very least will be fun for the two of us. Hopefully everyone else will kind of, get a chuckle out of it and take it as it's supposed to be, just kind of some of these things that that can be so divisive, and yet it's almost silly when you talk about them as a whole, or we talking about them even individually. But like, really, this is what we're getting upset about, the color of the benches. But that's what happens today, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I think it'll do a couple things. Maybe it might help us to actually see how silly it is. It's a perfect kind of takeaway from this. But it also shows us how spoiled I believe we are as a church, particularly in America. When you think about when the church was founded and the persecution that the church was under, by Nero as an example, literally using Christians as torches to light the streets. I mean, it's just despicable, the things that were happening. But these Christians and the disciples, nearly all of them were martyred for their faith. They were living a Christian life that wasn't just about going to church or going to a building. When they gathered together, they really felt, hey, we are the body of Christ. We are God's people, right, gathering together. And so I think, you're right, that the letters that Paul wrote to the churches, even in Revelation, they talk about the different churches of Laodicea and all these others that are described. These were based on location, not based on beliefs. And what was it? First Corinthians, I made a note. Was it Corinthians 1:11-13? Paul actually addresses this because there was an element of division beginning in those early days, though, because Paul says, hey, some of you said I'm from Paul, others Apollos, some Cephas, I'm of Jesus. Even then people were starting to pull towards their maybe favorite leader, and Paul addressed it right away. He said, hey, no, that's not what it's about. So basically Paul said, I can't save any of you. None of these man leaders who are men can save any of you. It's all about God. It's all about Jesus and what he did for us. So I think it's important for us to take that same principle today. Say, okay, maybe you go to a Baptist church, or maybe you go to a more traditional church versus a more contemporary. So, okay, yeah, there's differences. And we're going to look at some of those kind of in a, maybe a lighthearted way to a degree, but not allowing the differences to really separate us as Christians.
Yeah, it's something that we can get so carried away with all these different ones. And as you said, that Paul tried to put an end to the division, and yet that is today almost what we have more so than ever. I mean, we constantly see it even within denominations about things that will separate a denomination. Some things are more major than others, of course, with today's topics, but you see so much kind of pulling apart, and even within different, say, conventions that have certain edicts that maybe not all of the churches in that congregation or convention are for. And it's important to remember what you just said, that the church is not the building or the denomination. It's really that group of people, because as you were pointing out, kind of back in the Roman times where people were being persecuted, or even today where people have to meet in small groups. So if you've got different communist countries where they have to meet, in groups of 5, 10, 15, whatever, that is the church, wherever they happen to be able to be meeting in secret. If it's in someone's room, basement, wherever, that is the body, that is the church. It's not this building that they all go to once or twice a week. And I think a lot of times we lose sight of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. We have the wrong perspective. I looked real quick just to see, we're in Charleston or surrounding Charleston area. In Charleston alone, there's over 400 churches. And there's really, it's kind of like there's something for everyone. You're like, what do you like? What style do you like? What's your belief, about particular things within the church? Not aside, I don't believe in Jesus, not that type of thing. But even within the Christian church, we have different beliefs and things that tend to maybe divide people some. And the fact that there's over 400 churches makes you wonder. It's like, wow, that's a lot. It's great that we have freedom of religion. I mean, I'm not, against that obviously at all. It's like, man, 400 churches, that's quite a few. And you go to some that, maybe there's only 10 or 15 people there. It's like, well, why do we need to be separated? Why not these 10 or 15 join a church with another that has 60 or 70, and then you got a good strong body there? You just wonder, why are people so divided? Why does everyone have to have their own church, within the Christian belief system? Not saying there needs to be a one church, of the United States or whatever, kind of like the Church of England, nothing like that. But it's like everybody wants to have their own little space, and at some point you wonder if it's, is it really benefiting? Or again, if some of these smaller ones combined, would it be better? Would it be more effective? Would we be stronger as the body of Christ when we come together in unity? And I believe ultimately that's what it's about, right? The unity within the church. That's what God wants us to have. That's what we're called to have. We're supposed to be in unity with one another. Even if we go to different churches, even if we are different denominations within the Christian belief system, there should still be a unity there. Because at the foundation of it, if we truly believe everything the Bible says, we have that common ground. Whether or not in these few things we're going to go through in a second apply, we still have the common ground of Jesus Christ. If we believe that he is the way, the truth, and the life, and that no one comes to the Father except through him, then that's the foundational piece of it. All the rest of it, I'm not saying it doesn't matter, but it may pale a bit in comparison, particularly, when we start talking about the color of the benches or something like that. So, what are some of the things that you've seen? And we'll talk through maybe even some of the differences between how you grew up and I did. The church
Yeah.
styles that we experienced, and even in our adult lives. I know our family is an example. We've moved recently. We've been to some different styles of churches, and found that we are more comfortable or more drawn to some types rather than others. Not that either one is bad, but just you feel more at home, feel more more comfortable in certain environments. So let's talk about that for a little bit. What are some of the things, kind of the silly things really, that divide us in churches, and then unfortunately can even cause church division within a congregation?
Yeah, well, I'll do something, kind of along the lines of a presidential debate and go back and answer another question first. But it's funny what you were what you were talking about, with churches and kind of having these small congregations. I mean, obviously we're the holy city for a reason, because you drive
Yeah,
around
yeah,
and you see churches and steeples, and that is kind of cool being downtown though, and having the tallest, things, and kind of having that edict, that you're going to be able to see steeples above anything else. Yet we're
yeah,
kind of losing that, unfortunately. But I think I have heard multiple churches too. Like I know there was a committee that would go to different failing churches that maybe had a really nice building or an older building and go and say, okay, there's another startup church and it might have 3 or 4 times the congregation of what you have remaining. Can we bring them in? Can they more or less kind of take over the service? You will still be part of it. They can keep the name, whatever, kind of try to work out some type of agreement. And so often it doesn't happen because it's almost like churches are so territorial, so much kind of controlling their own fiefdom and losing sight of some of the important things, and going, well, even though we only have 15 members and 12 of them are 80 or older, no, we're not going to bring in that 100 and, however many people that are looking for a church home because, like for instance, we sing hymns here and they play modern music, which is, kind of the kickoff. And, of course, I would have to agree with the smaller church at that point, but that is funny how, kind of as the first kickoff, first topic that is something that is divisive. I mean, it's not as much
Yeah.
now because even going to what you would consider like high church, very formal churches that you can go to, even a lot of those are bringing in more music than just hymns. But I know for a while there, maybe I guess 90s, early 2000s, that was kind of a big thing. And I remember, frankly, I liked the hymns because that's what I grew up with. I grew up with the Baptist hymnal. You knew no matter what state you were in or where you were, if you were in a church that was a Southern Baptist church, that you open the hymnal and the first one, usually page one, but it depends if, maybe they had thrown in a few, the glossary or index or whatever at the beginning, the first hymn was Holy, Holy, Holy. And you pretty much knew all the hymns that were in that book. And I think there was probably comfort to it. We can talk about the merits of some of the music, but some of the more modern music that you heard on the radio, truthfully, too, a lot of it's significantly better now for probably multiple reasons, but a lot of it just really wasn't that great, but there started being more of that music that was brought in. And of course, that changed with who is presenting the music as well. But it's funny because I know that you and I think have, not very different, but different views on the music, that about or what our preference would be. That'd probably be
Yeah.
a better
Yeah.
way to say it, kind of what our preference would be. Because again, I like the kind of more modern, the stuff that you would hear on the radio if people listen to the radio still. I like doing that kind of driving around or in the car or doing something. But when it comes to actual church time, I just prefer hymns. Again, I think there's just something because I've grown up and I've been used to it. Where I know that no, y'all did call growing up. You did call him pastor, right? You didn't say this is our leader. The church that you went to, right? I mean, it
No,
wasn't
he was a
something like that.
pastor.
I
Yeah,
guess technically
it
it
wasn't a
wasn't technically
cult.
a cult. Yeah, not
Yeah, it wasn't a
technically.
cult.
It's had to keep it only up and up for tax purposes. But
Yeah, right.
um,
Yeah, so talking about, yeah, definitely not a cult. Talking about the hymns, it's funny looking back. I can kind of remember the progression because uh,
hmm.
starting out young, I mean, I still remember, of course, the hymn books. We had a blue hymn book. We actually had a brown one as well, an accompanying brown one. And there would
Hmm.
be the blue one was the primary, but every now and again there was a song in the brown book that said, "Today, grab your brown book. We are singing from page whatever." So we had a
Now,
couple of
what was it?
variations.
Yeah,
What?
what was in the brown? I mean, was it like some special like
No,
holiday
no,
type songs, or was this just
no.
like,
It was no, not really. It was just hymns. In fact, they may have been stolen from the Baptist organization because I believe that you guys have some brown hymn books. I don't know,
That's
but
right. Yeah,
but
that's right. When it was a special Sunday, you had to
yeah,
go for the,
exactly.
God's chosen ones.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
As I
So
heard some
uh
refer to it, but yeah.
yeah. But I remember though, probably early teen years when some of the newer back then even contemporary songs started to be worked in. So there was another leaflet style song
Hmm.
book. It was like a soft cover, almost like a paper stapled, booklet.
No, they had
That
like the
was
leader's wife written down a few things, and that's, kind of what you
No,
needed,
this was a
or
legit. They actually bought it. If I remember that, it was
oh
green and
wow.
had like a picture on the front or something. But anyway, it had more of your contemporary, and this again is back in the probably later '80s, maybe more of the contemporary type songs that weren't, 16 verses, repeat, and all this stuff. It
Yes.
was, your
Yeah.
shorter ones.
Yeah.
And so I remember the progression. And then I don't know if you guys had this or not, but we had, you remember the, not the overhead projectors like we have now that shoot from the ceiling, the literal ones like your math teacher would use in school where she would write on the transparency
Oh
and it would
yeah,
project it
like
onto
the
the screen.
actual, yeah. So we never had those. The different churches that I have,
Yeah.
our progression was basically hymnals to like the projector screen.
Okay.
We never had the
Yeah.
overhead projector. Like literally,
Oh,
we'd have
yeah.
like those translucent pages to where you had to put down and
Yes, yes. And at times they were just written, they were not printed. They were written on with, the Sharpie or not or
yeah,
whatever they use, the erasable ink.
yep,
And
yeah,
yeah, so the fun thing was you would have somebody literally up there having to flip the pages to
yeah. No, that's
each
yeah.
new course or whatever, each new thing that you were singing. So progress from that again, then into a monitor or something shooting from the ceiling. But as far as what I like the most, now I do. I connect more, I think, with more the contemporary style. I like it, but I also do thoroughly enjoy some of the hymns. There's nothing, absolutely nothing wrong with hymns. I don't dislike them. I think it's just like with any style of music, like people who grew up, let's say in the 60s and 70s, they still may enjoy music from that time, secular music from
Mm,
that time, still may
right.
enjoy it because that's what they grew up with. Yet it's not like all the music since then is not real music. Well, some may say it's not, but it's still legitimate music. And I
Yeah,
think
depends on the
that,
genre.
yeah, yeah, I think that that's where in the church we can get a little confused and begin to think or misled and begin to say, well, the hymns, that was the real worship music. That was where, those are really about Jesus. Well, it's okay. I get it. You might prefer those, but there is still the ability to worship with the new stuff. And I think you would agree that it really, with anything we're doing, it comes down to where's it coming from. If you're singing a hymn or if you're singing a contemporary song, if you are doing it in worship to God and not a production, because obviously you can make a big case for a lot of what you see on stages on Sunday morning today looks more like a production than than church service, right? With the lights and the smoke and the band and all of that. And maybe we'll even talk about some of that. But the honest truth is you can just have an organ and a song leader in a traditional church, and it could still be coming from that same performance thing, that same
Oh,
mindset of its performance. It's not worship. Do you agree?
yeah, I think that's, kind of whatever you do, you need to do it well. And I think that is a good point that you have because we could, kind of picked out hymns to talk about initially, but we could have said, okay, what about piano and organ versus the band? We could have said, a choir versus a worship leader or a praise band, that's up there. And you're right, it very much becomes kind of what is the focus, what is the intent of it, because you're right, you can have different ones who I've been in a few churches to where it was just the piano and organ and the pianist was very good and everybody knew it because it's like, wow, is that Mozart over there, tinkling the
Yeah.
ivories, on that was
Yeah.
quite the dramatic finish. Okay,
Yeah.
that's there. And by the same token, there's a lot now of the praise bands to where it's like, was that guitar solo really necessary this morning? Yeah, it's
Right.
like,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
interesting. It's like this guy rocks out on Guitar Hero or something. So yeah, it very much comes back to the intent of it and if it's done well or not. Because where I do prefer more so the organ and piano, kind of the simple arrangements, because I like the hymns. I would remember when we switched in middle school and started going to a different church and they actually had a full orchestra, and that actually would probably be my overall preference because that adds a lot, with the different instruments that can really give you this wonderful sound. And especially when you've got a church that's kind of singing in unison, or a choir, means I just like it a little bit more, to where when you have, now I've been in some too and I'm sure you have too, to where you've got a band that's pretty good and Yet again, at times it's almost distracting because you're up there watching them perform, rather than actually kind of going, okay, I have to remember, no matter if we're singing a song from the hymnal or from Chris Tomlin, that I'm giving glory to God. I am
Right.
not up there
Yeah.
just kind of, I'm not at a concert.
Right.
And again, I think, as you said, when you start putting in smoke and the different lighting effects and everything like that, it is definitely much more, it kind of crosses over, in my opinion, into a little bit more entertainment than praise. Now, I'm sure the people that are doing that would argue that point all day long, but from someone who is sitting in the audience, like, is the smoke really needed?
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. And again, I don't want to be critical because, you know, way back in the day, I mean, they would have, there's still churches that don't even have musical instruments in the building. They don't
Right.
believe that
Yeah.
that's appropriate. But so I don't want to be critical, but Grace and I joke sometimes because our church has lights on the stage, and they have these two towers of I don't know what they are, big bulbs under, they're bright. And every now and again, depending on the song, they'll just kind of pop on unexpectedly, like pop, 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 whatever, like. And sometimes, man, if you're not expecting it, you feel like you're maybe on the road to Damascus. Like, whoa, good
Yeah.
Lord, is that you? I can't see anything. I've been blinded, and waiting to hear the Lord's voice, and then you recover and be like, oh, okay, it was just the band. We're okay, we're okay.
Yeah. Right.
But
Right.
it's but yeah, there is the danger with anything. Again, it could be the preaching, it could be any piece of church, but there could be the danger to where even in the effort to do our best, that we can become distracting. Um, even as members, I mean, shoot, you've probably even been to church where the people in the congregation, maybe there's a particularly vocal man or woman singing who wants to make sure everybody hears them singing, and so in general, in a church setting, I think it's important for us to keep the focus on while we're there. I mean, hopefully that is to glorify God and to hear his word from, delivered from the pastor and be able to apply that. And I know for me, man, a lot of Sundays I'm guilty of, yeah, honestly, I go out of routine. It's what we do on Sunday morning. You get there, and you and I've talked about this before. You've heard the message, the material pretty good. Again, we grew up in church. Not that there's not anything new that could be revealed. Of course there is. But in general, the material. You've probably heard the general message before, so it can be easy to kind of detach and just wait for the final prayer and head out the door. So it really is important for us, especially as leaders of our home. And I do think about that sometimes. Like there are cases where I'm sitting there and I got my family lined up, all 19 of us. No, I'm just kidding. All seven of us
Yes,
are,
yeah.
taking
No,
up
you're
almost
right.
a
Yeah.
full row. And and I, and I've been guilty of it. But a lot of times I've stopped myself as well, is to kind of pop up something on like social media and just kind of scroll through my emails real quick, or what do I have coming up tomorrow? What's the weather like?
Yeah.
That's not good because, again, yeah, maybe I've heard this message, but my kids haven't. So I don't want them looking down the road, seeing dad not paying attention, dad looking at the weather or emails or social media while the pastor's preaching. It's important for me as a man, as the leader of our family, to show them the importance of not just going to church and sitting there, enduring it basically, but really being there to worship and not being distracted by all these other things that are happening potentially that maybe you don't even necessarily agree with. And if you will allow me to belabor the point one more time, it's also why it's important for us as parents to be careful what we say about church while we're at home, while we're around the dinner table,
Mhm.
that we don't talk down about the pastor or the praise team or even the lights and the smoke and whatever. I mean, you can have those discussions. Hey, what did you guys think about church? Do you have any questions? Is there, we do that sometimes. But again, I've also been guilty of maybe talking negatively. And that's not something as a father and even as a husband I should be promoting in my home. I need to guard my mouth, guard the words that are coming out, so that I'm not creating those types of feelings in our children. You agree? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I was actually just as you were talking, I was wondering it's I wonder because we were kind of initially talking about some of these kind of really silly things that lead to division. I wonder though if because what you said is very true in terms of we kind of get comfort. We get used to even the order of the worship service.
Yeah,
We
yeah,
get used to the hymns or the songs being presented in a particular way. And so when something is out of place or out of the ordinary, that we almost bristle at it. How dare they, move this around? Or, I was just thinking of so many other things, like if you have a choir, if they wear robes or not. I mean, there's some churches that they all wear, red, purple, whatever, yellow, whatever they happen, they'll wear
yeah,
robes, and others where they're just up there in their regular clothes. And that is a distraction for some people for whatever reason, especially if there's a change. If the choir has always wore robes and then all of a sudden they all walk out, and you're going, wait, what in the world? And why isn't Jim wearing a tie?
yeah, yeah,
It's crazy. Or again, I remember that change where we went from hymns to having screens, and there was people, what in the world are we doing with screens and all this stuff
yeah,
up
yeah.
there? And I mean,
This is the
it's kind
devil.
of yeah, exactly, and it's kind of nuts, that we would argue about all those things, or even you and I have talked about this before, how much it has thrown. Where I have been in services to where they really wanted to do something different, and even said, "All right, we're going to do something different." And after the introduction, they had the message. The pastor got up, after they had greeted everyone, you're going, what is he doing? Wait, is he preaching? Like
Is he
what?
singing
I
today?
forgot. Yeah. I forgot to start my clock. How do I know when his
Yeah.
28 minutes is up?
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's really, it's like, okay. And so wait, so now we're singing after he preaches. Yeah. I mean, it's, we are just thrown. And I wonder if that is the case, is that we are creatures of habit, especially as men. We like our routines, which there's nothing wrong with a good routine, for by any stretch. But it's amazing how much we get thrown and how much then we don't like something just because it's not what we're used to.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. That's true. And it is for different people, different things, the choir robes or, you know, a big change from when I grew up. And I'm not sure where you attend now, how you guys handle it. Used to be the offering plate would be passed around.
Hmm.
You would have the ushers come down the aisle and your plate would pass. You drop your money and your tithes, whatever you were doing. And now they don't even mention offering at our church. They have some drop boxes where you can put it in, maybe on the way out the door or out of the front entrance. But they don't mention it. They don't say, "Hey, I encourage you to give," or this is what we our target goal for the month, or those things you used to see. And I remember, man, this is really going back. Growing up, they had this plaque on the wall, and it would have how many attended today, how many attended last Sunday, what was the offering today, what was the offering last Sunday, and some would even have the hymnals that we'll be singing today. I don't know if you remember seeing that, but it was
Oh, that was like a bullet. That was the weekly bulletin. Yeah, we used to have
oh,
that to
okay,
where it
yeah,
was
yeah,
every single week when you came in, it had the order of worship, and then it was like a bifold, and you would open it up, and it would have last week. Here's church attendance, Sunday school attendance, needed budget offering, and budget received. Yeah,
yeah,
it
yeah,
used to have
and
basically your stats every
yeah,
week.
and Brother Jones, we didn't receive your tithes check yet, so
Yes, yeah, yes,
yeah.
chop chop.
Yeah, chop chop. I mean, you're one of our main players. We're dependent on you.
Yeah,
But so we do. I mean, our pastor is not afraid to talk about money, so I don't want to give that insinuation. He'll have messages about it here and there about the importance of giving and those types of things. So he doesn't shy away from stewardship, but this is different in that there's no formal. We're going to take up offering now, or on your way out, if you can drop something in a Dropbox, it helps us to be able to minister. Those types of things. And you wonder too if because maybe people begin associated with going to church where they want my money every time I go there, they're asking for
yeah,
money. So
yeah.
some have probably backed off on that. It's like, we don't want people to think it's about the money, and it's not. I mean, it really should be about stewardship of everything we have. But just another interesting change
Yeah,
in the way church is done.
it is. It's we still do pass the offering plate every
Mm.
week. and it's actually a pretty good sized church, but it is, but yet I couldn't tell you the last time I actually, dropped an envelope or a check in there because they have online, giving.
Online giving. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's so I would guess the vast majority of people do that, especially the regular tithers. I
Right.
think do that. I do remember growing up that there was a tiny little church that my grandparents went to at one time, and of course this was way before anybody even emailed, let alone did online giving, and they did that. They had what you're referring to. They had basically a like a treasure chest at the back of the room. And I remember thinking how different it was that they
Yeah.
didn't pass an offering plate.
Yeah.
And the pastor would just say, we've got like the giving box or whatever he called it at the back of the room. So, if you'd like to donate. I think too, though, that maybe they did it. They didn't want, kind of the spectacle of people passing the plate, but yet it's almost the same thing. If you've got people that are then when they're leaving, if you've got a line at the box and you're not in that line, you can feel that same, kind of
Yeah.
thing
Yeah.
as well. Yet I remember talking a few years later, talking to the pastor, they had more difficulty with their ties with their giving because they didn't pass it. And so it was people thought, I can just skip right on by, No, of course they had a lot more tippers than tithers.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
didn't have as many, they just had some givers, but still it was definitely a difference. And I'm sure there's some of those things that are kind of difficult for the church, kind of, okay, what are we going to do? Because as much as we maybe don't like to talk about it, the church does have to have an operating budget. They still have to be able to pay people to, be able to pay the light bill. They got to be able to turn the lights on, and people
Right.
like AC, especially right now when you're inside. So, it
Yeah.
is a necessary thing. So, however they're going to collect the money, it does need to be, talked about and kind of promoted. And of course, that it does say that in the bulletin now, to where there's no statistics about giving and stuff like that, but it does
Yeah.
say, to ties or offering, go to this website for it. But it is crazy how many different things, little things change and tweak and get moved around. That's just completely different. That the short time ago when you and I were wee lads.
Yeah. Yeah. Very short time ago. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting how different it is. And again, some of it, some of these changes aren't for the bad, aren't for the worse. Some of them are for the better. Some of them, may be questionable. But I think the another big one that we both kind of created some lists. I'm just looking down through here. I think another big one that I see different now is the way we actually dress and going to church. And I know that you and I
Oh
do
yeah.
differ here
Oh
because,
yes.
man, growing up, dude, if I got to wear jeans to service, it was something extraordinary because I had, my button ups and my church pants, and that's what I went to
Yep.
church in Sunday morning. Sunday morning for sure. I might have been able to get away with jeans on a Sunday night or maybe a Wednesday night because
Yeah.
we were 3 times a week churchgoers, man. We were there, and again, that's another change. You don't find too many churches now, at least that I'm aware of, that do the three days a week, the traditional Sunday morning, Sunday night, and
Right.
Wednesday night. That's kind of morphed into a Sunday morning with or without Sunday school. Again, Sunday school is becoming a little tougher to find. But then what I think is good is they have moved to a small group or community group type dynamic where you have a bunch of small groups that may meet in someone's house or another location or even a gym small group where they go to the gym. They have a devotion first, they work out, different things. I think that's great. But going back to the clothes today, I mean, people, even the pastors, are showing up in pretty much whatever they're
Yeah.
comfortable in. And for some people, as yourself, they may be a little off put by that, and I can kind of understand that to a degree. So, what are your share your insights on this?
Yeah, so I readily admit that I do talk out of both sides of my mouth on this, and I'll tell you why. Because yeah, growing up, yeah, we definitely had, there was that section in my closet that was church clothes. I mean that was your formal, and not that I had to wear a coat and tie or stuff like that, but it was definitely, khakis or whatever, pants, and then a button up during the winter, and so yeah, no, they're jeans, especially Sunday morning. I'm talking about, yeah, during the other times, and there was different periods, yeah, that we were, 3 times a week as well, or at least twice, depending what time of year it was, but yeah, but Sunday morning, nah, jeans was never an option. And as I have told you, and hopefully, you don't fall out of your chair. I have actually never worn jeans to a Sunday morning service, even as an adult. And it's funny, and here's why I guess I talk out of both sides, because I think we should present ourselves, not that we have to be formal, and I completely understand there's people that maybe can't afford it, don't have the ability to actually kind of dress a little bit nicer, so to speak, that they just don't. And
Hmm.
and that's okay. And I completely understand that. But, for a lot of us that maybe can at least, afford a clean pair of khakis or something like that, I struggle with going, I don't think you should look. And I've even heard people say, "Oh, it's great. We can go there and then we head right to the beach." Like, I just don't like the idea of seeing people come in board shorts and, in a tank top and their flip-flops before they're heading out, to church, or wearing hats and visors and stuff like that. I think it's more of a matter of respect. And it's almost to where, you and I have certain, shirts or clothes that we wear when we go to work. And it's almost kind of a mindset, that's really kind of what it is more so for me to wear when I put on, not just a little t-shirt or something like that to go to church. I'm kind of going, okay, I'm going to put myself in a mindset that I'm going to worship. This is a special place. This is the Lord's house. And that's why I'm doing it. I'm not doing it so that I can go, hey, look at my new, duds. It's
Right.
not that. It's not a show. And I know, again, a lot of people will argue that fact. Kind of why people argue for school uniforms is because they don't want people to have to go, oh, well, look at what they're wearing and they're wearing. And I know, and I've heard too, especially some, from females as well, that there's definitely a lot of look at what she's wearing and she's got on this and that. And even, with guys, I get it can be distracting. Yet, again, I don't think, that is a line. If I see the pastor up there wearing skinny jeans and something else going, yeah, I don't know that this is the place for me, that I feel almost distracted, by it. But, and I've said this story too, just to finish up. I remember hearing that Gandhi, he went to university in Bombay in India, and then he went over to England to study the law, and he heard about this Jesus fellow, and he was curious. So he goes, okay, I want to go, go to a church and hear a little bit more about Jesus. So Gandhi goes, and they turn him away. They're going, nah, sorry, sir, you don't look right. They turn him away. You can't come in here. And it's amazing. It's one of those kind of little quirks or oddities, if human history would have been changed in a profound way if he had been welcomed in and actually, become a Christian, kind
Mm.
of as his global influence that he ended up
Yeah.
having was from a Christian standpoint. I mean, that's kind of huge. So I always kind of keep that in the back of my mind. But again, I think it's a complete difference from someone who literally cannot afford and they are just coming as they are. They are presenting themselves because it's not like, we've ever heard about Jesus or the disciples, having their formal tunics or cloaks, but I think they probably dusted off the sandals a little bit and, a little different time, but still, it's one thing if you can't afford it, if this is just coming and presenting yourself. It's another thing if you're, it's just something else that you're doing and checking off the box on your way out to the beach or to the campsite.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a great point. I um I think that really, the example of Gandhi that you gave, I think that really brings it home and maybe allows us to kind of turn the corner, because all of these things we've talked about, one over the other isn't better or worse. They're fine. We're not talking about things that are, deal breakers, like you're not going to heaven if you have the pastor preach before the praise team comes up, or
Right.
it's a deal breaker if you don't pass the plate versus give online. Those are really inconsequential to salvation. Unfortunately, though, that it can create division, and you'll wonder how many first-time visitors, again, talking about Gandhi, first-time visitors go into a church and they sense the division in that church. They
Hmm.
sense,
Yeah.
or even maybe not the division within the church, but they sense that they're an outsider and they don't feel like this is a welcoming place for them because they look different, or their socioeconomic level doesn't match whatever's there. Um, you know but they sense it, so they don't go back. And unfortunately, for some, that can also give them a negative perspective of Christianity in general. Oh, this is how Christians are. And I think that's what we, this is just my opinion, but I think that's one of the things we've done a bad job of, when even when addressing um, political issues or issues of morality in the world. It's not like we're technically on the wrong side of the issue. Like we're not supporting what's wrong. We want to support what's right, but how are we doing it? You know, when you see Christians out there, yelling and picketing and God hates certain people groups and things like that.
Mhm.
What's that saying about Christians? What is that saying about Jesus? The way I've heard it described to me before is we are ambassadors of Christ. An ambassador represents who they're representing well. They're passing along the traits and the values of whoever they're representing. And I just can't imagine Jesus doing those things, right? So, but when the world sees Christians doing that, then we're misrepresenting Jesus. But unfortunately, we can also be pushing people away from hearing the gospel because of their experience. So, in the world or in the church, we got to be careful that we are representing Christ well. And if we're, either as a church, we're divided because the carpet's red and we think it should be blue, or we're sitting in seats and we think they should be benches instead. When we're all wrapped up in those inconsequential things, and somebody comes in, they could feel the tension in the air, maybe even hear hums of it. I've even heard pastors say things from the pulpit about things, maybe that are happening under the surface in the church, where yes, it needs to be addressed, but do you want to address it in front of potential strangers who are just visiting your church? Do you really want them to be privy to some of those silly arguments that might be happening? Or should you really have maybe what they would call a called conference, or a special meeting? Hey, whoever's interested in ironing these things out, please come to the service, whatever. But man, we can push people away, like Gandhi was pushed away, because they feel like they don't belong, or there's this church thing, man, this is just, it's almost political. It's, you're on one side or the other, and it's just not a good way to be. And I was just Googling and looking around a little bit at what causes church splits and division within a church. And the number one, and this is AI generated, actually, one of the, the new AI feature that you can use on Google. The number one thing it listed was pride. And when you look at all the things we're talking about and whether we like one or the other, and does it satisfy me? Am I comfortable? Do I like it? Is this the way I think it should be? Doesn't it all boil down to pride? Not that you're or I are being prideful, but what I'm saying is, people who really get locked in on these things and could allow it to create division, it boils down to pride. And I've witnessed and I've heard stories about people, what you would have thought were strong members in that church, strong Christian men, getting ready to have a fist fight with someone else in the church at a business meeting. It's like, seriously, guys, is this what it boils down to? You guys are older men. I mean, the guys I'm talking about right now that I'm thinking of, dude, I think they're in their 60s. I'm like, seriously, number one, you guys shouldn't be fighting in your 60s. Neither of you look that healthy. You're probably going to injure yourselves more than the other person. However, that aside, it's spiritually ridiculous. What are you doing? You guys are supposed to be the mature ones here, leading and setting the example for these younger guys, and you are about to throw fists. I mean, it's sad. It really is sad. But pride, manipulation. Some churches, unfortunately, the leadership or people within the congregations will use manipulation to get people in their favor. And I've seen versions of this. You and I've talked about this before, how maybe not even in church, but maybe in a career or whatever, you have certain types of people who want to get people in their corner. Hey, let me share this with you. I really, I'm just sharing with you. I wouldn't tell this to anybody else. I want you to know about it because, I feel like I can trust you. And, this individual over here, man, if you knew, getting them in their corner, it's manipulation. if they really wanted to solve a problem, first of all, they go directly to the person they have an issue with. And if that didn't work, what's the Bible tell us to do? Take another person, right? You don't just start going around talking about people. Disagreements, financial issues, lack of communication, immorality in the church obviously can create some division. We've seen that happen on a large scale, multiple places, especially, in social media and things. And then the last one I listed that they mentioned was power struggle. There being this hunger for power within the church, and it could be coming either from the pastor or from the congregation. I saw a clip a few days ago. It was talking about how a new pastor came on. I think it was a meme or something, but a new pastor came on, and the congregation was like, who's in charge, right? Talking to the pastor, basically saying, hey, we're in charge. You just work for us, basically. And unfortunately, I think a lot of churches also have that perspective where the pastor, we're paying him to bring us the word. He has no authority here other than that. He is the one who preaches and fills the pulpit. We run the church. And that's dangerous, man. If God has truly called that man to come to your church, you need to trust his leadership and his character, not just his ability to speak in front of a congregation. He's not a politician, right? He's supposed to be a man of God. Well, shouldn't be a politician. Yeah, he's supposed to be a man of God leading the church in the direction that the Lord is leading him. Now, not to say he shouldn't be surrounded with with a group that is helping him lead. I mean, I don't believe that a pastor should be left alone to make every decision on his own. There needs to be a board or something there that he converses with, that he trusts. But just saying, you're here only to preach, we'll make the decisions is also a wrong perspective, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's funny. I think that so often that people, if you're trying to invite someone to church, trying to witness to someone, that so often the feedback or the blowback that they will say is, well, why would I want to go there? I know this person, I know that person. And it's difficult to say, well, yeah, but I'm bringing you to church, you're coming to God, not to to see this person and that person, and it's difficult because they're going, well, wait a minute, so if I'm going, then I'm going to be kind of associated, or they don't see any difference. They know someone who goes and like, well, they're just as petty and jealous as everyone else that I know. So why should I go? What difference is it going to make in my life if it is apparently making no difference in theirs? So it's definitely something that we can get bogged down in, that we kind of lose our footing as Christians, that we become kind of embroiled in these kind of silly little things about, like you said, about pews versus individual seats, and which one we prefer and what color they should be. And it's funny, I was actually at one. I remember moving into a house back in my early single days, and there was a church not too far, few minutes away, and I thought, okay, I'll go try there on Sunday. I went there once because I remember going and sitting down, and there was something that you could feel. It was just kind of a weird vibe that was there, and it wasn't, it's kind of I guess a small, medium-sized church, probably 150, 200 people, something like that were there. And the pastor did allude to something. And I just kept thinking, there is some kind of division. There is something weird that is taking place here that's going on. I mean, you could, as you said earlier, you could really feel it, that there was something. I was like, nah, I'm not getting in the middle of this, I mean, and it seemed to be something kind of small and petty. And it's funny that what you said, it kind of almost perfectly sums up our political landscape right now too. It's not enough for me to be right, you have to be wrong, or I am right, therefore you have to be wrong. And people, on both sides of the aisle, left and right, do a terrible job now about actually saying, okay, let's come together for the good of the country, because no matter if we had the same ideology or not, we have to govern together. It's the same thing within the church, that we don't stop and take the time to hear someone else's viewpoint on that, to where I might go, well, I like benches. It might go, yeah, I understand that. But when we have pews, it's easier to move them, to get the cherry picker in here to change the lights. It's easier to change around if we have different worship styles, if we have the youth, if we have to add more people for an Easter or whatever, it's easier. So if you thought, oh, okay, well, okay, I can understand that. But we don't want to do that. Yeah. It's like, yeah, we don't want to hear that. No, we've had pews since 1842, and therefore we need to continue. It's ridiculous. It
Yeah.
really is
Yeah.
when you stop and think about it. Yet those are, and it's the same thing politically, that we can't stop and go, okay, what is their viewpoint? Where are they coming from? Is there somewhere, and maybe there are some issues that we don't feel that there are, things that we can compromise on it, and that's something, but we can still do it in a civil manner without getting, all upset and just taking our ball and going home. And it's the same
Yeah.
thing, with the church, that, yeah, if we have a pastor and he's not doing exactly what we want, we'll get rid of him, get somebody else in here. We're this church, and we'll get somebody better in here. And it's not serving anyone well when that's how we act. When we become more territorial, when we become more focused on the things that we are doing instead of the word that is presenting and our true reason for even being there in the first place. Because other than
Right.
that, it's like, well, just go join, the Kiwanis or some other kind of, group
Yeah.
organization, and
Yeah.
you can have everything you want and have it exactly how you want, and people come in, great. If they don't, who cares? But that's not our purpose. That's not our journey as a church. And yet so often we act just like it's another, organization, political or community organization, rather than actually being a place that's supposed to enrich people and
Yeah.
and ultimately come to know Jesus and to get to heaven.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Looking at it again from the wrong perspective. How can this place serve me rather than how can I serve? How can I be a blessing here? How can the Lord use me during this time and in this space? But so kind of wrapping it up, let's look at some biblical references. Again, a lot of these things are lighthearted, but unfortunately can create division within the church. We've seen it. So one of these I had already mentioned, Matthew 18:15 through 16 talks about how if we have a problem, we're not supposed to take it around to everybody and garner people's favor and get them in our corner and kind of create a us versus them scenario. It tells us that we're supposed to handle these issues privately. Go to the individual, directly. And if for some reason, like if I had an issue and you and I went to church together and you said, hey, we just need to sing hymns. I said, no, hymns are old school. We need to sing contemporary. And I went to you and I said, Rusty, man, I feel like you're wrong, man. You need to come up with the times. This isn't the 1800s anymore. And he said, no, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Whatever. And we couldn't come to an agreement. Then the Bible says, well, go to someone else. Get a third party involved that's trustworthy. Maybe it's the pastor or a deacon or something like that. And just talk it through. But I think a lot of people are really hesitant to do that. But that's the biblical way to handle things.
Right. Of course, I would just get mad, leave, and start my own church, and we would sing nothing but hymns, and we would,
Yeah.
talk about you. We would start our church worship service at least 15 to 30 minutes before you did. That way we could, be out and into the restaurants before you did as well. And I'm curious too, which the verse, which version of the Bible did you use there? Because clearly it was not the King James, to where, too, it's like, well, in this church, we either use, the King James. Yeah, I'll give you a list of ones that are acceptable: the King James, the New American Standard, maybe in certain circumstances, the NIV, but don't bring in here with the Message, even though that's, might be easier for people to understand, but maybe we'll allow the youth to have that, or what are some other, I'm trying to think of, I have to look over to see some other versions, but, even
Yeah,
that,
there's
it's
so
kind of funny
many.
as you were
Yeah.
reading. It was like, yeah, even that is something too, isn't it? Well, which version were you going to use?
Well, I prefer to translate directly from the Greek and Hebrew whenever I'm
Yeah,
reading.
that's true. I
So,
know. Yes, yes. With you go directly to
yeah,
the manuscripts
the
and
manuscripts. Yeah, exactly. No, yeah, it's funny that people have such stiff opinions on it. And now it is important to know what we're reading, and we need to make sure that the scripture we're reading includes all the scripture, right? We don't want it to be so diluted that it loses its meaning, and we want to make sure that again everything's included. But people who are King James version, this wasn't like some King James from Jesus's time. I mean, this is not the original manuscripts. This is King James of England
yeah. Wait,
who
what? Yeah.
yeah, exactly. I mean, some put so much stock in the King James version that they think it's like the original manuscripts put in binding,
Yeah.
and that's not the case. It's also a translation. So yeah, I agree. I use a lot of times I use the NIV. I have King James version, and the nice thing, I also use the Bible app quite a bit. I use U version. There's lots of Bible apps to use, but I use U version. What I like about that is, regardless of where I may start, like if I start in a KJV or NIV, and I just want to see, hey, how would this be worded? How can this be worded differently? Maybe there's something, a complex word, and I want to share something with my kids. I was looking for a different way to share it. I can, show me in this version, just and maybe even the message every now and again. That's definitely not my go-to. That's a tough one, because it reads more like a book, and it's very, it just gets the main ideas across, which again, it has its place, I believe, but I wouldn't necessarily preach from that from the pulpit on a Sunday. But there are so many opinions on those types of things. But again, going back to it, man, if we have an issue, the best thing we could do is go directly to the person, and if needed, involve someone else to iron it out. It doesn't need to go past us and create division in the church. Because I think what we need to remember with all of these things, man, we are going to be held responsible for our life and what we did in the body of Christ, in the church. We're going to be held responsible for that. Were we continually creating division? Were we continually getting, this side versus that side and stirring things up? Or were we someone who was able to bring people together? Did we look for common ground? Did we look for ways to not stray away from the truth of the Bible, but look for ways to unite people within the church? Say, okay, listen, I know you like pews, you like benches. I get it. We can't have both, but where's some common ground here? Can we at least come to an understanding of why one or the other is more important and more useful in this time? And then hopefully some people can be mature and be okay with not getting their way, because it's church. It's not your own house where you pick your furniture. You don't go out to eat and tell them, I don't like your booths, I think you should have more tables and chairs. You take what's there, you enjoy the food, and you also pay for it, and then you go home, right? So it's the same thing with church to a degree. It's like, go there for its purpose. Serve, be fed from the word of God, be good stewards of your finances toward the church, and then go out and do something with it, right? It's not about what you're sitting on. It's about what you're hearing while you're there.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm still just kind of blown away by you saying that King James was not a king, while in England, where Jesus grew up when he was a little boy, right? So that's just,
yeah, exactly.
that is news to me. It's
yeah.
I just kept thinking, I was like, wait a minute, so you mean that movie that I used to grow up watching, The Jesus of Nazareth? It was that miniseries when it first came out. I don't know if it's 3, 4, episodes or pieces to it. And they used to play that every Easter, and I actually really enjoyed the movie. But it is funny that the the actor had blue eyes and talked with a very formal English accent. So it's like, wait a minute, that's not right. So
Wait, what? Yeah.
I know, golly, that's surprising.
And the picture that you have of Jesus praying in the garden on your dining room wall probably doesn't accurately reflect what he looked like.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. If I had such a thing, yeah, it is funny seeing some of those different things as we go into different homes and going, I don't think I've ever seen a blonde tint in someone from the Middle East's hair, but okay.
Yeah. It was sun bleached. You spent a lot of time
Yes,
outdoors.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, he did spend a lot of times walking to and fro,
That's
So
right.
yes, it must have been, maybe that was during the 40 days in the wilderness, and there wasn't a lot of shade, I guess. So
yeah.
it's some year out the sun a little more, bleaches it out. Maybe so, maybe so, maybe there should be a little timestamp about when you're referring to. Then it would make sense, right?
Right,
So
exactly. It would make a lot more sense then. Uh,
yeah.
yeah, another scripture from Paul. This one was where he wrote to Timothy in 2 Timothy 2:23-26. He's telling Timothy to avoid foolish controversy, but be kind, patient, and gentle. And again, one of the best things we could do sometimes, especially if someone's approaching us, say, hey, let me tell you something. Wait, I'm going to avoid your foolish controversy here, man. I don't want anything to do with it. like you said, I don't want to get in the middle of this. When you went to visit the church, this is not the place for me. Maybe we're not the company for you. You know,
Right, exactly.
it's
Yeah, exactly right.
it's you know, staying away from that type of thing. This is just a funny story, man. I don't know if I'll ever forget this, Chris. I still laugh about it. We were I think relatively new at a church we were attending. We attended there for quite a while, and relatively new still. We were young, and the pastor came up to me. Or Chris said we were eating somewhere, so maybe I guess we're eating. I remembered that part slightly different, but anyway, he came and he said, "Yeah, there's something that's going on with so and so, but don't ask me who it is. I can't tell you, but this, and this happened." And I was like, "Okay, yeah, I don't even know." He's like, "But I can't tell you. I can't tell you." I was like, "Yeah, that's fine. I don't want to." He's like, "Okay, I'll just tell you." And he told me who it was and all this stuff. And I was like, "What?" I didn't want to know. I didn't ask. It was just so
Yeah.
funny. And again, Chris and I, we still laugh about this. Like, that was just, he couldn't wait to tell somebody, right? And it's sometimes, again, or people in general, we can be like that, man. We cannot wait to share something juicy about someone else, even in the church. Let me tell you what this person said or did, or how they acted, or what happened to them. And unfortunately, a lot of times we'll even kind of disguise it as, "Hey man, I got something you need to pray for. Hey man, so and so really going through a hard time. But I wasn't supposed to tell anybody, but I'm going to tell you because I want you to be able to pray for them." And that's, yeah, it's bogus. That's not why we're sharing, or why that person is sharing, but it happens. But we need to be wise in what we allow ourselves to be caught up in. If we get drawn into the middle of these controversies, unfortunately, even if we don't really care, we've allowed ourselves to become a part of it, and now it's us versus them, even if it's not really what's going on in our heart.
Yeah, it is very easy, and we try to disguise it in all kind of different ways. Like you said, we'll go up and, hey, just want to let you know there's something to think about. Our leadership team, the elders, they're thinking of changing the worship time, the service from 11 o'clock to 10:30. So, that's I don't know. I think we might lose a few people. Just something to think about, something to pray about. And if you didn't know, here are the 6 people that are on that team. If you needed to reach out, I think they would like to hear from some of us directly. If about this time, what we think about it. So that's just something we need to consider. Something we need to think about. It's we become experts in being passive aggressive,
Yeah,
and kind
yeah,
of getting our point across without maybe directly saying it, without just coming out and saying, "Listen, so I like to sleep late on Sundays. The odds of me being on time, I barely make it to 11 o'clock. 10:30 is not happening. That's just my personal preference. And since I'm a little bit of a narcissist, I think everyone in this whole church should start at 11 because that's what I want. That if
yeah,
we were having like the subtitles, that's probably what it would actually say, but that's not at all how we present it. We try to present it that, we're going to come to them out of a spirit of love, and just letting wanting you to be informed. And it's not true. We do get involved in all those petty, foolish things that we should stay above. Of course, I remember hearing a pastor say one time, and I thought it was great advice, that we should save our anger for the big things.
mm,
That they're the little things, yeah, they might be
yeah,
irritating. Maybe we like it starting at 10:30 or 10:15 or 11, but ultimately, is that really going to be the most important thing about that service, about us going to church and attending, is what time it starts? As
right,
long as we know in advance, it's like, well, as long as is that really the most important thing? Is it really the most important thing? What version of the Bible, which, yeah, I've actually got all 4 of those versions, and there's certain passages I like more than others, so
yeah,
which
yeah,
one the pastor happens to prefer, if he studies from one, likes reading from another. I mean, is that really that important, or is it the actual message and word that he is bringing to us? And maybe we go, okay, let's stop if he's starting to say things that maybe are a little bit more opinion and not actually biblical. Maybe that is what we go, we kind of get our guard up a little bit more, or that, those are more important issues. And these other things, there's all these books, about sweat the details, and actually worry about the small stuff, because it's all small stuff, and the small stuff adds up to the big stuff. And maybe there is some merit to that in other aspects of our life. But when we are dealing with others, like you said, when you're dealing outside of our household, outside of our own family, we have to realize we are part of a church community and we have to compromise on certain things. There's certain things that we
Right.
don't, that we shouldn't.
Right.
We should not debate whether Jesus was born of a virgin, and lived a perfect life. I don't think that's ever up for debate in a church that probably either one of us would attend.
No.
But if we are going to debate again, the lighting, or if the coffee, free coffee is going to be kind of in the back area where if they have Sunday school, or out in the front foyer, again, does that really matter? Is that
Exactly.
what we really need to get ourselves concerned about? So yeah, I think it's very important to get mad about the things that matter, about the big things, and kind of not sweat some of those other little things. They're
Yeah.
yeah, they're as you and I have talked about pretty much all these different topics before. Those are kind of the fun little, chats that you have, the fun little things that you decide when you agree on the big things.
Yeah.
And ultimately,
Yeah.
yeah, whether you and I agree on band versus choir, hymns versus contemporary music, it doesn't change that we both have the same basic faith, and it doesn't change how I feel about you or vice versa. I mean, we can agree to that and go, whatever. All right, so we're
Yeah.
singing a hymn this
Yeah.
week and doing, a modern song next week. Cool.
Well,
I
the
mean,
good
it's
news is too, I'll be able to, put in a good word for you to help you get into heaven when I get there, because I mean,
yeah,
obviously I'm
well,
going to be a little closer to the Lord because of the way I believe than you are, but
well, see,
you
I
know,
thought, since I will be in like the upper room, having been a Baptist my whole life, that, then, kind of as someone looked up and said, let me have a drop of water, that, I will too reach down and say, yes, it's okay. He converted later in life.
yeah, yeah. Well, and then we could also go to the reference, the first shall be last and the last shall be first.
That's right.
I
I
mean,
know.
but
Yeah. That's
yeah,
what
you're
your leader
right.
used to say, right? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. There are things, you're going back to being angry. There are things that should make us angry as Christians, but it's surely
Sure.
not those silly things about, these things we've talked about. Those things should not make us angry. They should be very low on the important scale of our lives. We should be angry about things like sex trafficking and abuse and those types of things. They should legitimately make us angry and cause us to do something about it. We should be passionate about those types of issues and act on them, not to sit around being angry and talking about them, but do something about a particular issue that you're passionate about, that makes you angry. But yeah, we waste our anger so much on the little things, and maybe even because we're too immature to focus on the big things. We're too busy trying to control the church, and what happens in it,
Right.
to really focus on the things that matter. And obviously that's dangerous. It's a waste of time and resources. It's a waste of energy. Who cares if we have benches versus seats when there's people in our community that are living, in a cardboard box, or being abused, or being kidnapped and put into a sex traffic ring. All of these things that could be happening in any of our communities. Where's our anger with that? Where's our involvement? Where are we trying to gather people together to do something about that, like we would be with something happening within the church that surely doesn't matter? The last idea, I guess, on how we should approach and handle these disagreements that we may have, you can find in Ephesians 4:31 and 32, and also in Galatians 6:1, where it talks about when we approach someone, or when we do confront someone, if we're going to that individual, then we need to do it with the right heart and mind. That we're not going in an angry, I've got to win this argument manner. You mentioned it earlier in our talk about how, it's not I win, you lose. It's like, okay, let's work this thing out. Let me share, because it very well could be my problem. There have been multiple times when something's happened and immediately, kind of rubs me the wrong way, and I get a little irate, and I want to fire back, and unfortunately sometimes I have, and then found out, oh, I see, I was actually wrong. And then that's even tougher. It's like, crap, if I would have just waited and not said anything, this I would have understood better. So we need to
Right.
be careful that we're not, in the Bible says this, not quick to speak, but we're quick to listen, slow to speak. And even when we feel like we're right, and even if we've studied it out and know we're right, that we don't just react. I think we should always pray before we approach someone if there's a confrontation that needs to happen, but then also not just praying that you get your way, but praying that your heart is right and that the Lord gives you the words to say, and preparing the heart of the person that you're about to confront so that it can be a good encounter. And that is, as it says in Ephesians and in Galatians, that we're not going with bitterness or rage or anger, but we're going meekly and desiring restoration or unity in that conversation.
Yeah, it's funny how quickly we are to have anger, and yet, of course, as we are told, we're not supposed to. And as we have said in other podcasts, that when we are going to someone, when we have to confront them or discuss something, that we should do it out of love and not for love of ourselves, not for love of being right or getting our own
Yeah,
way,
yeah,
but actually. I just want you to hear my perspective, my opinion about it. And I forgot if it was James Clear in Atomic Habits or if it was Arthur Brooks that was talking about if you have something and you immediately want to fire back, to set a timer, for say 30 minutes or so,
yeah.
and wait. And he was also talking about doing this with someone who wanted to smoke and to disassociate the actual wanting to smoke with the actual action, and how it can
Mm-hmm.
actually work in other periods, whether you get that email or a phone call, or someone, just happens to walk up and start talking, and you feel like, you can kind of feel your blood boiling, so to speak, and you want to fire back, to actually hit pause and go, okay, I need to, and again, as we've talked about, there's nothing wrong with saying, listen, I'll think about this and I'll get back to you, in a day, 2 days, whatever, to where we can kind of actually take some of the emotion out of it. And again, the same thing when we get emails or calls or texts now too, to go, okay, I need to take my emotion out of this, and actually think through it, to study if this is a divisive issue, to pray about it, to where I can actually give a good, well thought out answer, to where it is one that I feel like this is truly what I feel. This is not something that I'm getting caught up in the emotion of the moment or of the time. And I'm going, okay, I have thought about this. I have prayed about this. Here's my opinion. Here is where I
Mm-hmm.
stand on this. But we can't be so closed off too that we don't hear what the other is trying to say to us, and I think there's a lot of merit in, or validity in, going to that person like, listen, I understand your viewpoint. I understand your perspective on this. I differ, and here's why. So if I'm missing something, tell me what I'm missing.
Yeah.
I truly want to have a dialogue, with you. I don't want to just talk at you, and I don't want to have you talk at me. Let's see if we can't come to some type of understanding. And if not, let's agree too that when we're all done, that we're not going to let this, divide us, that this is not going to be a divisive issue, especially if it's one of those kind of peripheral issues, not one of the major ones that we kind of should take a hard stance on. Because you're right, it's kind of ridiculous that, we will get up in arms about whether or not we're clapping after the special music, when there are people out who can't afford to feed their children that day.
Yeah.
So it's we very much, we are so blessed to be an American, to live here, to where we can worship freely. We are lucky that, we have jobs and opportunities available, that we can't get bogged down in these little silly things that make people not want to come into the church. That's what people see a lot of times. They don't see kind of maybe the overall spirit and heart and maybe the love of that a church has, because they see all these other little things that people start bickering and fighting back and forth. And we have to do a much better job about changing that, not about hiding it, but
Mm-hmm.
about dealing with those issues. It doesn't mean when we have issues that we sweep under the rug. It just means that we talk about them, we get them out in the open, and we go, okay, we either agree or we don't, and let's move on. Let's not
Yeah.
continue to belabor the point.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. That's good. So, kind of wrapping up, guys, we hope that you've enjoyed this episode. I've enjoyed talking about it. I think, again, some of the silly examples are fun to talk through, but then the serious side of it as well, looking at, okay, yeah, why it's funny. Some of them really do create division. And then, aside from those silly things, there's a lot of things that can divide us as a church. And if we're divided within the church, it's going to be really hard to make a difference in the world around us. A house divided against itself can't stand, right from the Bible. It's true. So we don't want to be a house divided against itself. We want to be a church of unity. And even if we don't go to the same church, you and I, as an example, we don't go to the same church, but we're in unity. We both know and believe Jesus Christ is our Savior, and we're able to pray for one another. And we've done that before, and know that each of us have a man in our life that we're able to share things with and get good Christian perspective. And so for you guys who are watching or listening, we just want to encourage you. If you don't have that, first of all, if you don't have a church that you belong to, Based on statistics, there's probably hundreds in your area. Find one that's a Bible believing church, that does preach the entire word of God. Find one though, and get plugged in, and not just looking for somewhere that can serve you, but somewhere you can serve and be involved and make a difference. And then also make sure, like we've said many times on this podcast, make sure you've got at least one guy, but hopefully multiple guys in your life that are able to be pace setters for you, that are able to keep you moving toward the finish line and giving you good, honest feedback about things they see in your life, and being able to pray for you and just be there. And then you are doing the same for them, hopefully, as well. But man, thank you for your perspective as a lifelong Baptist and traditional Baptist, and I do appreciate it, man. I love the differences that we have there, and how we're able to kind of make light of them, but also point out some things that, again, could be problems for some people. So anyway, thank you very much. Thank you guys for listening, and we hope you have a great rest of your week. God bless you. Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Intentional Man Podcast. If you haven't already, please follow us, give us a 5-star rating, and share the podcast with a man you think may enjoy it. If you'd like to contact us, you can email us at theintentionalmanpodcast@mententional.org. For more information about our show topics, visit us online at www.mententional.org. We hope you have a great week, and remember, guys, choose to be intentional.